Welcome to the John Freakin' Muir Pod. Lace up those boots and sling on the pack for a romp through trails, short and long. With your host and Renaissance man, Doc. It's time to embrace the suck.
Welcome back to another week on the trail, dirtbags and hiker trash. I'm Doc, and this is the John Freakin' Muir Pod. Let's start off with a reminder. If you are enjoying the podcast, take just a minute, help us out, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. And if you're not enjoying the pod, well, just go ahead and keep that to yourself. All right, let's get to this week's guests. Throughout the first 200 plus episodes of this podcast, I have talked to some really amazing human beings who have been accomplished in many different areas, and they've done some incredible achievements. But I have to tell you, I am pretty darn excited to talk to this week's guests. The calendar year Triple Crown has been called the most prestigious accomplishment in long-distance hiking. This feat, in which a hiker hikes the entirety of the PCT, the AT, and the CDT in a single calendar year, was completed first by Flying Brian Robinson in 2001. Heather Anish Anderson became the first woman to complete the task in 2018. And this past year, 2022, we saw the largest class of completers of the calendar year Triple Crown. And guess what? They're all here today. That's right. This episode is devoted to the calendar year quartet. It is my honor to welcome to the John Freakin' Muir Pod, Kansas Express, Boomerang, Professor, and Quadzilla. How's it going, guys?
Great. How are you,
Doc? Good to be here.
Hey. Hi.
And as a special treat for this episode, I've invited to be my color commentator, my colorful co-host, Jeff Legend Garmeyer. How's it going, Jeff?
Good, and be careful what you wish for, but this will be exciting.
Now, because we have so many folks here on the podcast, it'd probably be a good idea for me to call on people by name before you respond, or if you jump in, identify yourself so that our listeners can keep track of who's talking. All right, so I introduced you by trail names. Let's start out with, what is your real name and how did you come by your trail name? How was that bestowed upon you? Let's start with Boomerang.
Hi, I'm Renee, and my trail name is Boomerang, like you said, and I got it in 17 when I hiked the PCT before. I crashed at a friend's place in Sisters, Oregon with a shin splints. I had to recover a bit for a couple of days. And she had some stuff going on, I think the fourth day or something after I slept there. And she dropped me out at St. James Pass. And I hiked south. So I ran after Mackenzie's Pass into a ranger who was shutting down the trail because of the wildfires. So I got off back to Mackenzie's Pass, took a ride back to Sisters, called her, hey, can I crash another night at your place? And she was like, hey, man, I threw you out in the morning and you just came back like a boomerang. So yeah, now I'm going with the name Boomerang, I guess.
Nice. All right. How about Kansas Express?
Oh, so guess it goes back to 2012 on my first southbound through hike of the Appalachian Trail. And Kansas Express, it's kind of interchangeable. It's Kansas Express or Kansas Trainwreck, kind of day dependent. But I got to New York and I didn't have a trail name yet. So to make a long story short, I was off trail for 17 days and in a cardiac ICU in Danbury, Connecticut for 5 of them. I got myopericarditis, so life-threatening cardiac infection. And when I got back on trail, I don't recall the section hiker's name, but he's just like, man, like, he's like, you got to Kent in 36 days. Didn't really have much backpacking experience before. I'm like, yeah, but I ran into kind of a host of problems. And he basically just said, well, you're like a little messed up little engine that could. And I'm like, okay, little engine, that's great. I'll take that. He's like, but when you're up moving about, you have the capacity to go fast. So he's kind of stuck with the train analogy. And since I was from Kansas, And I don't know. I think Kansas gets overlooked much of the time, as it usually should. He's like, your name's Kansas Express now. I'm like, okay, well, I'm over a third of the way done with the AT and don't have one, so I guess I'll take that.
Is Kansas really flatter than a pancake?
No, I think that probably. I think Florida probably will take that title,
but not a lot of.
It's pretty flat. I mean, it is pretty flat though.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now Kansas, that story took a turn right in the middle, and it was fun watching everybody's face as you ended up in the ICU. Everybody's eyes got really a little wide there. That was probably a scary experience.
Yeah, I love though. So
okay, all right. And your real name?
Charlie Jansen.
Charlie Jansen. All right. Carl Stanfield, professor. How'd you come by professor?
Yeah, thanks, Doc. So yeah, Carl Stanfield is my name. And I got professor my first through hike in 2018 on the AT going north. I had been with the group for like 5 days. We weren't that far into it. But I'd been the logistics guy the whole time. And like, I did a lot of planning before the trail. So like, I kind of had the first 100 miles or so mapped out in my head and was talking with the guys I was with of like, oh, we can get to this shelter this day if we do this many miles. And like, then we'll get to this place. We can go into this town and maybe take a zero. And I got ahead of my friends and got to a shelter one day, and they caught up and said, hey, we figured out your trail name. We were talking back here and said, we're just trying to figure out what we're going to do the next few days. And then Phil here said, oh, don't worry about it. We won't have to talk about it. We'll just ask the professor when we see him. And then they caught up and told me, and I was stoked. I've been on my best behavior for like the first week, not trying to like get a trail name that made me sound like I didn't know what I was doing. And then I got professor, and I just clung on to that. I was stoked to be professor.
The professor. This is almost like a Gilligan's Island setup right here with the six of us. So
yeah,
we're missing Ginger and Marianne.
Yeah, very dated reference, but good one.
Yeah, it's I get that a lot
right?
from. Yeah, I get that reference a lot from just people in your age demographic, Doc.
Yeah. Perfect. We've got all the older listeners hooked now.
Yeah. Now, Jack Jones, Quadzilla, you are calling in this morning from a bomb cyclone in Northern California.
Yeah, we actually watched a transformer explode last night. So that was fun. Just out the window. Yeah.
Dang.
Yeah, and outside there's this giant, I think it's like I don't know, some kind of tree. I still don't know what any trees are. It's some sort of pine, but it's really tall and it's like huge and it's been swaying all night. So if I just go offline and probably because the tree fell on me while I'm off trail. So
now that's great. You spent an entire year out in the wilderness amongst the trees. You have no idea which tree is which. You've had a lot of time to study this.
no, yeah, I should probably know that. And also it's like been raining more than any other time this year since I've been home. So that's been nice.
And how did you come by Quadzilla?
Quadzilla, just on the AT, not a great story. Just people would like, oh, your legs are huge. That must be helpful for hiking. Like, not really. It's just extra weight. And then, what was it? Ice Spring Shelter in the Smokies. I remember it was just a really gorgeous sunrise, and somebody there just said, like, you should be Quadzilla. And I took it, and just because, yeah, big legs. That's it.
Big legs. That's great. Now, legend. I love your story because it involves pizza.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whenever pizza's involved in a trail name story, it's top notch.
Yeah, it took a long time to get a trail name for me too. It was like mile 390 or something of the PCT or somewhere around there. And I was 20 years old trying to impress all the people that were older than me that really watched Gilligan's Island and stuff back in the day. And we were in Wrightwood and we left and made the classic mistake. We didn't pack out any good town food to eat for the first dinner out on trail. And so I volunteered to hitchhike back into town and get us some pizzas and steaks and beer and have a good old time at I think it's Grassy Valley Visitor Center or something. And that's what we did. And I got back with all the pizzas and they were surprised that it actually worked. And because it was like dark outside and hitching is usually pretty rough at night. And they deemed it legendary. And now I'm stuck with the name Legend.
Legendary. Can you guys hear this in the background? It is coming down like cats and dogs right now on my house. Okay.
What city are you in?
I'm in Santa Clarita,
Okay.
which is about 40 miles north of Los Angeles.
Right next to the PCT, right?
Yeah, about 25 minutes. I picked up the professor, took him to dinner when he was finishing up his calendar year Triple Crown.
Yeah, just a few weeks ago, huh?
Yeah, not that long ago. That was great.
Wow, you're curating your guests early.
That's right. So, hey, we have a couple of segments on the podcast here that we actually get a bonus today because we have 4 for the price of 1, possibly 5 if my co-host wants to weigh in on these. And so usually we take a little bit of time on this. We're gonna have to take just a snapshot from each of you because there's so many of us. So the first segment,
the Must Bring Gear Review,
is the Must Bring Gear Review, sponsored by the ultralight backpacking gear company 6 Moon Designs. And here's how it works. If you were to let a stranger pack your bag with pretty much generic gear for a multi-day hike, what is the one specific piece of gear you would insist on being packed? And so we're going to take turns here and hear about what do you have to have out there? What did you have to have out there on the calendar Triple Crown? What is the most important piece of gear that you said, you know what, I need to take this? And we started with Boomerang last time, so let's go to Kansas Express this time.
Well, I guess to start off unoriginally, when I was listening to the podcast up in Montana, I know that Legend said like Advil by Bayer or something to that effect, and that would be, I think we could probably all identify with that. But so yeah, definitely anti-inflammatories, especially in the last 1,500 miles. Probably I had a blown SI joint in my lower back, so things got pretty painful at the end. But I would say just something generically. Just a good pair of shoes.
I like how just casually you've mentioned the ER room trip, a blown SI joint, and just like not a big deal. It's pretty impressive.
I mean, it's not a life ending. At least this one wasn't. So,
man, you might low key have already won the toughest on the podcast award here.
Now, Kansas, you said a shoe, lightweight shoe. Do you have a particular brand that you favor?
I have really weird feet. My feet are like hands, which is a bizarre analogy. But I would say the Ultra Olympus 4 or 5 was kind of the go-to shoe this year, although I did switch back and forth between Ultras and the Hoka Speed Goats, which I realize are 2 completely different shoes. But yeah, I would say probably the Ultra Olympus. On other through hikes, I've used Salomon, Scott's, Adidas, Saucony's, Brooks. So this year, the Ultra Olympus 4 and 5 was kind of ended up being the go-to.
I think you just named every shoe out there. You're keeping your sponsorship opportunities open, so that's smart.
Yeah, that was my plan.
Yeah,
that was my plan.
Very good. Professor, how about you? What's your must-bring piece of gear out there?
Yeah, I'm gonna say a stove. I cooked all year for the most part. I mean, sometimes I'd like pack a sandwich or something out of town, but I had a stove all year, and it's called a Gas One, which is like a slightly more Americanized version of the BRS 3000T, which is this little like $20 Amazon stove. It's the exact same stove, but it's painted to look like a pocket rocket. So it's like red and silver, but it weighs less than an ounce. So like it wasn't much weight, and mine held up the whole year. I paid $20 for this thing and it lasted the whole time. But I they're like, even in the summer when it was hot, I always liked having a hot meal at the end of the day.
Okay.
I like it. Complete agreement on the stove. It goes so many people skip out, but even just a cup of coffee is pretty nice.
Yeah, we're not doing the hiking pool today, but just by a show of hands, how many of you are cold soakers? Boomerang's a cold soaker.
Yeah.
Ouch.
Yeah, in the cold segments, I also carry the stove, but through most of the year, I was cold soaking.
There's a certain level of insanity that comes with cold soaking. That is like extra tough.
It's okay when the temperatures are decent, I would say. But when it's get down to around 30 degrees or something, then it's just rough and miserable. So
yeah,
wouldn't recommend.
Okay. Hey,
and we hiked together a little bit around that. I was with him right before he got his stove, and then he picked it up in northern Colorado, right?
Yeah. Just when entering Colorado, I guess. Also when I got my warmer sleeping bag. So yeah, just be more prepared for cold weather.
Okay, now before we get to Quadzilla, Professor, you bring up an important topic that I was thinking about. It's almost, I feel bad asking it, but now that you've broached it, I can ask it, because it's like asking a person who lives in Germany if he knows my friend who lives in another part of Germany. I mean, Germany is a big country, just like the calendar year Triple Crown. There's a lot of miles involved with the calendar year Triple Crown. So my question was going to be, did any of you run into each other out there? And obviously there was a connection between Boomerang and Professor. Anybody else?
I didn't see
I
any of
also
them.
went to Kansas Express.
Oh, Boomerang and
yeah.
Kansas Express too?
Yeah.
Yeah, I ran into a Boomerang in Wyoming coming out of the winds getting into the Great Basin, and then I hiked with Carl for a day out of Du Bois, Wyoming, and then we kind of leapfrogged because I thought he was ahead of me. That the day after entering the Bridger Teton Wilderness, so it was just a few days before I ran into Boomerang, actually. But we had talked. Professor and I were on a Zoom call with Stanford boys on kind of like a Q&A session with Buzz and Woody last December. It was right before you hit the Art Loeb Trail, is kind of like your shakedown hike, right?
Yeah.
So and then I didn't meet him until right outside of Du Bois, Wyoming, and then my wife came in and met me, and we had stayed in town that night, and we went up and picked Professor up on and drove him back, and we had dinner together and got back to trail the next day together.
Yeah, that was sweet. And then there was a group chat of like 5 of us, Quadzilla and Kansas Express and I, on social media that have been going on since like February. So we've been in touch for the most part. And then I heard about Boomerang because my buddy Grease Pig had hiked with him, and then I hiked most of the AT with Grease Pig. So I've been hearing about Boomerang, but he's not on social media. So we ran into each other when I got to the northern part of the CDT. We saw each other in town in East Glacier for just a minute. And then coming through, like going through the Bob, it was like I was calling it the calendar year Triple Crown Parade. So we'd see the Nobo hikers, and they'd say, "Oh, we just ran into Boomerang and Kansas Express," and there were a couple other guys out there too. There were like 6 of us. They were all within a day or two of each other, and we were the last southbounds coming in like mid-August. But we were all really close to each other for a long time. And then I got onto the PCT at Kennedy Meadows South in June, and I was like a day apart from Quadzilla. And that was enough. We never ran into each other.
Yeah, the guy with the
I
big
managed
legs, if he gets a
to-
lead on you, you're not going to catch him.
Yeah.
Well, I was behind it. I never caught him.
Oh,
No, I managed to not see any of these guys throughout the whole year.
Wow.
Yeah.
no,
They were
Jack.
probably what it was is they were smarter and they were ahead of the bad weather or not as far north with the bad weather. So maybe my route wasn't as smart. But I'll answer your must bring question too.
Yes.
It's a fanny pack, so I can keep all my snacks, because that might be something you wouldn't think to bring on a backpacking trip, but fanny pack is vital.
Snack access, very, very important. All right. Hey, Boomerang, what about you?
I thought about it and I got a couple of minutes now to think about it. So, I think I would go with the gray Thermarest sleeping pad, the Neo Air X Thermo, how it is called. I slept, I think, about 400 days in total on one pad. No puncture, no hole, no nothing. So it's still going strong, and I think I can get away with a lighter quilt when I take the thick sleeping pads. So yeah, I love it. So it's reliable, I guess, or at least I think it is. So yeah, it's a good piece of gear, I think.
Okay. Legend, you want to amend your anti-inflammatory response from a previous episode, or?
Yeah, I really like these over mitts. They're basically just Dyneema mittens that are like really lightweight, or they can be like sil nylon, but they're waterproof, weigh basically nothing, and they're carry them on like day hikes, trail runs, backpacking trips, and they're just good for keeping your hands warm if it starts raining or snowing or whatever. It's just like a big old, like an oven mitt, but it's just made out of like waterproof material. It's pretty good when you're in a pinch, just to save your hands a little bit and stay a little warmer.
To be honest, I didn't think I was going to hear that today. I had no expectation when I woke up this morning that we would be talking about waterproof oven mitts on the trail.
Yeah, no, you got to think outside the box. They've thought of almost everything. Actually,
you left the box a long time ago, Jeff.
Yeah, I know. I can't even see it anymore. But yeah, I had a few years ago, I talked to a company about making some of them, and they're like, these will never sell. And it's probably true, but I think they're just like the greatest piece of gear ever because they're so lightweight. They look kind of dumb, but for they have no insulation, but since they're waterproof, they just keep in so much warmth that I've had just those down to like 4 degrees and my hands stay warm enough to function. So big proponent, but no one will ever buy them because they look dumb like oven mitts.
Now, I think I neglected in your intro, Jeff, to mention that you are also a calendar year Triple Crowner. You did that in what year?
Way back in 2016.
Wow. Yeah, you are old enough to get the Gilligan's Island reference. So it's
I guess so. I think I just started early.
Now, I think a question that many of our listeners might have is why? What is the inspiration? What is the drive behind trying to do all three in the same calendar year? And was this I imagine that each of you had long trail experience prior to taking on the calendar year Triple Crown. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
See nodding heads, thumbs up. And so who started off the last question? Was that Kansas Express?
I believe so.
Okay, Professor, why would you want to do the calendar Triple Crown?
Yeah, so I I kind of had it in my head for a while before I got into thru hiking. I did the AT in 2018, and I'd been listening to backpacking podcasts for a little while. I'd heard a few interviews with this guy named Legend on Backpacker Radio, who had just done, I guess, like a year and a half ago at that point, the calendar Triple Crown. And I didn't know that was a thing. And then, so that got kind of in the back of my head a little bit when I started thru hiking and thought about it. And then, like after 2020 and everything, it felt like, well, the sooner the better to do something big. And so I spent all of 2021 planning and just like saving up. I knew I was going to be spending a year on trail. But I also knew that like I wanted to do this, and like it was a short list, and it felt to me like the biggest reason that more people hadn't done it was just access and having time to do it. And I had time to do it. So I thought like, oh, that's pretty cool. I can be like within the first 20 people to ever do this thing. I've got time, and I think I've got like the mental endurance to be out there. And then also it just sounded great to live on trail for a year, like no matter what else happened. I had like contingency plans of like slowing down and doing something different, but the plan was to be on trail for a year. And doing the calendar Triple Crown sounded great. I'd already done the AT and the PCT. And so I'd finish up my normal Triple Crown by doing the other two again, which I was stoked to do. And it did not disappoint. It is awesome.
Fantastic. Quadzilla, what got into your head to do this?
I come up with a different answer every time I answer it. So I think the truth is a lot of these big plans, it comes from somewhere really deep. And then, so the true answer is something in the subconscious, and then our conscious mind like makes up a good sounding reason. But I think we truly don't know. But I'll try and answer. Um, I think for me, it's kind of like a final exam. My life trajectory I had like from growing up um, and into my 20s, like it was just a lot of like so much struggling. And then like finding out, figuring out, I hopped on the AT in 2016. I was like, okay, maybe I'm starting to figure something out. And then I started doing these meditation retreats and then just like, reading all these different books. And like a lot of times it feels like I'm spinning my wheels, not getting anywhere. But the last couple of years, I was like, okay, I think I'm starting to figure out this life thing. And I think I'm starting to like, I feel like I'm more competent and confident and can do a lot more bigger things. And then, but there's still that piece of you that like questions and wonders and like, am I just fooling myself? Am I making things up? And the calendar year Triple Crown came because I still needed to finish the PCT to get my Triple Crown. And at that point, hiking, I say like just in quotes, like hiking one trail is really tough. But at that point, I wasn't wondering whether I could finish the PCT. If I didn't get injured or something weird happened, I knew I would finish it. And it was like, well, let's do this bigger thing. And it was really this, like, I don't know if I can do it, but like, if I can do a calendar year Triple Crown, then that will require this amount of discipline and like mental toughness and all these traits that I think was really what I was after through why I got into through hiking in the first place. And it was like, it's not a place to develop those traits. Is if you have to have those traits to be able to finish, or at least that was how I thought of it in my mind. So it was this little like, am I as tough or whatever as I think I am? And let's go out here and give it a test and see what happens.
Final exam. I love that. I think a lot of folks out there on the long trails are looking for that limit of their endurance. And it's kind of what sounds like with how you explained it there. You've done all this prep and now you're wondering, am I able to do this? And
yeah. And I had felt on other trails, like I didn't feel like I had absolutely pushed my limits. When I get tired, you take a couple of days off, and when it's raining outside, you don't go out, or at least I didn't. I think other people do more, but yeah, I felt like I was like, well, that was a fun adventure, but like I kind of really phoned it in there at the end, and yeah, it was just more of a more test.
Now, have you found your limit yet, Boomerang? I'm sorry, Quadzilla.
Yeah, I think I found it pretty early on, just going through the ice and the snow in like New Hampshire and Maine. I remember, like, because it was over 200 miles where I averaged less than 1 mile per hour, and I remember that like between Mount Wolf and whatever the next mountain was, it was like nobody had been through there all winter, and I didn't have snowshoes at the time, so I was like, it was way steep. I was just like trying to crawl through, and and it was so cold at night, like you're trying to not slip off the mountain with the ice spikes and just grabbing onto trees is the only reason, I didn't fall off the mountain there. And like that was enough for me to show me like, okay, this is really, really tough and I can be out here. And after that, I kind of felt like, okay, I got what I came out here for. And the rest of the summer was like, well, I better do this because I said I was going to do this. But I had already, the AT in the winter answered my question of like, what am I made of?
Right. Now you referenced that you struggled there's a lot of struggle in your life for the first 20 or so years, and you have a very interesting backstory that if you're not familiar with, if you're listening to this and you're not familiar with Quadzilla's backstory, I encourage you to take a listen to his previous episode on the podcast. It is a fascinating story. So, Boomerang, why in the world would you do this?
I don't know. I came to the States, in 1st of March, and the original plan was to hike the AT. northbound, pretty standard. And then if I have some more time and still enjoy hiking, I would go to the West Coast and hike some parts of the PCT again, and yeah, just enjoying it. But then I think like 400 miles in on the AT, and I made pretty solid time, I would say. A guy told me, hey, if you move on like that, Mount Katahdin will be closed when you get there because it's still winter. I was like, but there are people in front of me, like this Sportzilla guy, which I haven't heard before. So I was like, what are they doing? And then he was like, hey, they're switching the trail, and they're going for the Triple Crown. And I mean, I heard of the Calendar Triple Crown and everything, but it was, I don't know, just too big to really think about it. And but then I thought, hey, he's doing it, and maybe I can figure out a plan. And so I hiked a bit more and planned out a bit the game plan for the next coming month. And I had some time, got some research going on where I need to extend my visa and everything. So yeah, and then instead of going to the PCT or hike the AT in its whole length, I got off trail in Rutland and switched to the CDT and hiked the desert part, and so it all continues. And yeah, so it was more like an idea which grew on the trail, and yeah, because I had no idea that I would be capable of hiking it. So yeah.
Jeff, I'm a little blown away by that. I don't know if you are, but what I just heard was he set out to hike the AT, and he decided on the trail, while he was on the trail, he was going to do the calendar year Triple Crown, and he successfully completed that. I mean, that's just wild, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah, it's very much like the hikers not wanting a trail to end, and so just not ending it. It's like you guys probably met a bunch of people out there dreading going back to the real world, and then just putting it off for months more is the style. Then maybe it'll catch on.
just keep
Yeah,
walking.
Boomerang, had you hiked a trail before, Boomerang?
I just hiked the PCT in 17, so that would be my only long trail in the States. Yeah. So I was sure that I was able to hike one of the other trails, and the AT. I mean, the northern section of the AT is for sure the toughest in my opinion. But in the beginning, I came through it pretty good, I would say. So I was like, we'll see how it works out in the end.
Do you guys agree that Northern AT was the toughest? Because I think I would agree with that, especially when you guys have to go through. That's probably least ideal conditions because you got to pick some place to go through in the ice and snow. But did you guys all have pretty rough adventures up there?
Yeah, it was tough for sure. I had the advantage. I was like exactly 2 weeks behind Quadzilla, which is like within a day or two of when he was posting videos. So the day or two before I'd get to a spot, I would see like, oh, this is what it was like 2 weeks ago. So it's at least not going to be that bad, especially getting up to like Moosilauke and seeing like, oh, he had to do this flip thing, which is crazy. Hopefully it won't be that bad. And then it wasn't as bad when I went through, but it's still, and even if it wasn't as snowy and icy, I think it might still have been the hardest, but that certainly didn't help.
Yeah. And then Quadzilla, I think it's pretty assured you had a pretty rough time up there.
Yeah, no, it was. I'm trying to think. Was that worse than like southern Colorado in the snow? But I think so because it was just steeper, like steeper and icier. And I'm sure that was because I was listening to your book as I was going through, and I was like, well, if Legend can do this with like one microspike and screwing screws into his shoes, then I can probably survive this. But that's the other interesting thing, like. Because like reading your book, listening to it, like I was dreading northern, just the north. I'm like, this is going to be just the worst. And it was pretty terrible, but it's not as, I don't know if it was that your experience. Like, it's not as bad when you go through it as you imagine. Like, it's all still doable. It's not an impossible thing.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like Kansas Express describing all the issues and stuff where to him, it doesn't feel as bad. But if I describe, or any of you describe, the Northeast, it sounds atrocious and no one would go there. But in the moment, or when you're out there, it's like, yeah, it's really hard, but it's not, I don't know, it's not as scary or hard as in the moment. Looking back, it's a little crazier, I think. But I mean, you just
That's true.
have it
And
in
like,
front of you, so you keep going.
right. And like all of your stories and like my videos, I'm only doing that. Like we're only telling the worst stories and we're only posting like the worst video. Like, it's not that bad for the entire way either. You only get the worst bits.
True.
Guys, I don't know if you heard the same thing I did. I heard Quadzilla say that if Jeff Garmire did this, then of course I can do it. And then I heard Professor say that, well, Quadzilla's a couple weeks ahead of me, so I mean, if he's doing it, I can do it. It's all about the efficacy there.
Yeah, so you're welcome, guys, paving the way.
Now, before we go to break, Kansas Express, why would you do this? Why would you spend a almost a complete year out there hiking thousands of miles? What is the total on that? It's 7,700, 7,800 miles.
I'll give it.
Yeah, just because there's variation in the miles on the Continental Divide Trail. Mine ended up being 7,546.8. Just because there's so many like variant routes. But
you can all have 8,000. I'll give it all 8,000 to you guys. The town stops. Everyone gets 8,000.
I always feel like this is a pretty multifaceted prompt. And I think a lot of us have listed numerous reasons of pertaining to the why, as to why we undertook this adventure. But like what the other fellow said, to try to test your physiological and psychological limit. And I definitely feel like some of the days I definitely reached that point. But and it's easy to say this like in retrospect, but I feel like overall the testing the physiological and psychological limit still remains elusive, which I guess just like leans to one thing, that maybe I just didn't go hard enough. I don't know. But also hiking for me has been a really good way to like process grief and trauma. I lost my brother 3 years ago, and I was going to do this in 2020, but everybody knows what happened in that spring. So I kind of like pushed it off. And I'm a high school teacher and cross country and track coach by trade. So the timing didn't work out. And so once I kind of made that hard line decision that I was going to take off in midwinter of 2022, it was kind of a done deal. So it was kind of like metabolizing and just like processing that grief, because I hadn't really done that yet. I feel like through hiking is typically like a young person's game, like a young single person's game. And on my first through hike, I was definitely in that boat. But I can say pretty resolutely now that I was much more psychologically equipped now being married to a really strong partner, and how being married doesn't make you like softer or weaker. It definitely makes you tougher. And she definitely helped elicit that as the year went by. Like she went back to travel nursing for this. I quit my job for this. And so like quitting was never an option. That never crossed my mind either. But I just kind of realized, also how much we had at stake for me to go chase this dream of mine. And being a high school teacher and cross country and track coach, I wanted to just show the kids I teach or that I've taught across 3 different districts in Kansas and Colorado that really anything is possible in a pretty like tumultuous time. So hope is like always just such a strong driver, such a strong motivator for me, or to help, or I guess to promote that semblance or the idea of hope. I also did it for just to make this like less selfish. I I raise money for the National Wildlife Federation as well, which promotes American conservation. I wanted to see all these beautiful areas. I had done the AT before, but I've always wanted to do the PCT and the CDT, but I didn't really. I wanted to just cram it in. And so if I was going to do, I was for sure set. Originally, my plan was to just do the PCT and CDT in a year. I'm like, well, let's just go for the trifecta. Let's just do the AT over again. I feel like I'm fairly familiar with it now. And then just bringing home, just believing that I could do it before I started. I knew it wasn't going to be, a walk in the woods. I knew that it was not going to be smooth sailing, but I knew going into it though that I had the capacity to do it. I just needed to, kind of internally put my money where my mouth was and just do it. So.
Wow. Really sorry to hear about your brother. That's so tough. And I know a lot of people out there on the trail are working on things like that. They're dealing with issues, life issues, and there really is a healing and transformative power to the trail on those long hikes. So I hope that was productive for you and helpful.
Always is.
Yeah, you brought up a good point. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, and just like the hiking community is so awesome. Everybody's like just so positive and optimistic, and not only do you like experience the best in nature, but you experience the best in humanity as well. And after every hike, no matter if it's like a 10-day stint on the Washita Trail or over 200 and just short of 286 days, it's the same. I come back always like just super refreshed and just ready to rock and roll again.
Right.
In society.
Yep. Now, Jeff, I think you brought up a good point, is that he had a great support system at home. You think that's important to be able to accomplish something like this, to have people pulling for you and supporting you along the way?
Yeah, I think you either need fans or haters to fuel you to the finish. So one or the other. But yeah, I think the support system is really key because it's a lot of big stuff happens out there and big emotions and everything, and having someone to either share them with or push you forward or even take your mind off what you're doing, I think is pretty clutch, especially even talking to other hikers and hearing about their stories. I think was at least when I was out there, was pretty refreshing because you spend so many hours in your own head, to get to like just ask someone else about their hike is kind of a breath of fresh air. So
okay. Hey, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to hear from our great sponsors, and we come back. I want to talk to each of you about your approach to the Calendar Triple Crown. How did you attack it? And also kind of some of the fine details like start date, end date, how long did it take you? And of course, we're always looking for some good Type 2 fun. So stay tuned for that. We'll be right back. And welcome back. We are talking to Boomerang, Kansas Express, Professor, and Quadzilla about their successful calendar year Triple Crown in 2022. And joining us, of course, is Jeff Legend Garmeyer, who did the feat back in the dark ages of 2016, you said?
Yeah. Yep.
2016. Yes.
Yep.
So I know that there are different ways to approach the calendar year Triple Crown. In fact, in doing my research for this episode, I know that the first person to complete the calendar year Triple Crown without flipping was Matt Squeaky Hayes. I think just from following each of your journeys, I think each of you had some flipping going on. You didn't do each path continuous from start to end and then go to the next one. Is that correct? Yeah, I'm seeing nodding heads. So I think Quadzilla, I think it's your turn. What was your start date and your end date, and tell us how you approached the calendar year Triple Crown.
Start date, spring year, February 16th, so that's southern terminus of the Appalachian Trail. Appalachian, people keep correcting me on that. And then end date was December 2nd at the monument in New Mexico, the southern terminus of the Continental Divide. And my approach, so I started off, my goal or my plan originally was to do like 1,000 miles on the AT. I was just going to see how far I get in my mind, the AT was going to be a lot colder and a lot more snowy than it ended up being. I don't know if got luckier with, I think did get pretty lucky down south. Like there was only one big snowstorm, and that was just in around Harrisburg, Virginia for one day, like a blizzard, and it got pretty cold that night. But then other than that, didn't hit much snow at all down south. And I felt really good. I think I had hit Harper's Ferry 40 days in, and like I was pushing really hard in the beginning on the AT, hiking till 11. I've stopped between 11 a.m. and 1 a.m. most nights, and I was still motivated enough to wake up relatively early, like 6:37 at that time. So pretty long days and just going, and I just felt strong and good. So I was like, well, this would be kind of cool to go all the way as far north as I can go. So just pushed through the snow and the ice. I knew it was Vermont. Yeah, as I got into Vermont, there was a snowstorm, and then I was pushing that night. It was like midnight when I got to the shelter. I was like, well, this is a snowstorm. I need to get to the shelter so I can stay sheltered. And like, right, this is middle of April, Vermont. Of course, the shelter is full of people who have set up their tents. Like the one day that there's people in a shelter, of course, is during the snowstorm. So I had to like set up my tent outside, and it collapsed several times in the snow. And ended up there was over, I don't know, probably close to 2 feet of snow. And then there was another snowstorm going to New Hampshire, and yeah, it just seemed like just kept hitting all the snow, and then ended up getting up to Katahdin. It was like a week before they opened, and so that was the unknown because they don't announce when they're going to open Katahdin. They just open it, and I didn't know. I think I might have stuck around if I knew it would open in a week, because it ended up being a real pain in the butt to fly back to Katahdin from before. But because I had been, posting a lot of stuff on social, and I just thought it'd be better to not like go through, because Katahdin also has kind of a contentious relationship with through hikers too. I know when there were a couple FKT people that had brought alcohol, and people, Katahdin didn't like that. So, with me posting everything, I figured set like a good example, and I'll just bite the bullet and come back for that. But yeah, I was gonna push as far north as I could, and then I went and started the PCT. I think it was May 25th or 26th northbound from the southern terminus, and super hot in the desert there. I ended up having to just night hike a lot in the Mojave, like from 5 p.m. to 10 a.m. That was the schedule. And
Were any other hikers out there in the southern desert for the PCT that late in the year? Curious.
Yeah, there was.
Okay.
There was a decent amount. We had that was my most fun time, because we had a crew of a bunch of other hikers, and we went through like the aqueducts together, all painted up, and all those night hikes were with other people, and that was some of the most fun times out there. There was, definitely other people out, and then did the CDT southbound. And the goal was to try to beat the snow. Didn't quite beat the snow in Colorado, and then at that point, it was kind of a relief. It's like this thing you've been dreading finally happened, and I was able to push through and take some alternates to get around some of the worst spots there, and ended at the second. So I will finish here.
Where did Katahdin fit back in to go back and tag that guy?
Oh yeah, I went there from Helena. So I had friends that I had made from the first time. So it was Helena to Boston, and my friend drove me all night. We ran out of gas. We he dropped me off at like Able Bridge at like 8 a.m. I climbed it, went back down, he picked me up, and then we drove all night again and got back down to Boston at like 2 a.m. for a 8 a.m. flight. It was pretty stupid. If it was any other terminus, I don't think I would have done that. But Katahdin's so iconic.
So Jack, am I to understand then that you did? I mean, basically, you did do the calendar Triple Crown without flipping. You did the AT south to north, you did the PCT south to north, and then you did the CDT north to south.
Yeah. So in my
Wow.
mind, that's yeah. It was
Mhm.
just a matter of permits, and the Baxter wasn't open yet for whatever. Yeah.
Okay. Boomerang, how about you? What was your approach? How are you going to sequence the trails? We know you started out on the AT, and when you made the decision that you're going to do the calendar year. What was your start
Yeah.
date, your end date of the whole thing, and what was your sequence?
I started March 2nd on Springer Mountain, and I finished. I think we talked about it earlier, off the record. So I think, well, I'm quite certain that it's the 9th of November in Rutland, Vermont. So I flipped a bunch. I tried to, yeah, walk the AT as far north as I could get, and then I saw some pictures of Godzilla's snow party. So I was like, yeah, I'm not really interested in that stuff. I tried to make it to Hanover, New Hampshire, and get off to a flight to Boston there, but just made it to Rutland, and yeah, got a flight from Boston to El Paso, went for the CDT Desert, hiked it to Grants, New Mexico from the southern terminus. Figured out my PCT permit situation because, yeah, it was basically everything kind of get on the flight. I got a flip-flop permit, so I went north from the South Lake Tahoe area till the Canadian border, came back to South Lake Tahoe, went for the Mexican border because in between, the original plan was to go to the Canadian border and then switch to the CDT, hike it to Grants, and then figure out everything else. But since I'm from Europe, I had to extend my visa. So I got an appointment for that in California. So I was like, okay, then that's the freaking desert. And yeah, I hiked from South Lake Tahoe to the Mexican border. Between that, I had a good buddy pick me up from the trail, brought me to the office. I did my fingerprint stuff and all that kind of, yeah, mess. And then I finished that, got to the CDT northern terminus, went to Grants, New Mexico, and then got to Katahdin, basically. When I arrived at Katahdin to go south from there, the same day Baxter State closed, so the trails around, yeah, to summit Katahdin was closed. So I'm missing 5 miles and something, which is kind of a bummer, but also a good reason to come back. So yeah, and then I walked south to Rutland, Vermont, and finished there.
Okay. Now you started in March. You decided on the AT that you're going to do the calendar year, and you finished in early November. Anybody else find that just amazing?
Yeah, it totally blew my mind out there. That wasn't a plan. It just happened, and then I think he did it the fastest out of all of us too.
Yeah, Boomerang. What was your average daily mileage?
I think, I mean, it's basically 7,500 miles divided by 250 or something. So around 30, I think, just shy under it. So yeah, was quite a ride, but I mean, I think you all would agree that it's quite fun as well.
Yeah, it's fun, I think, or else everyone should have quit if they didn't have fun out there.
I don't know. I saw some of Quadzilla's films. I'm not sure it was fun all the time.
Well, it's got to be bad sometimes to make it fun. Sometimes you got to get the variability.
Yeah, and I think probably for people that like this stuff, it's the really shitty conditions that are the most fun sometimes. They're the most, maybe not fun is the right word, but like the most rewarding. Like if they were all just, the basin, I think I would have certainly quit if it was just all like dirt roads and nothing rough. I would have quit. I was thinking through the basin. Like if it was all like this, I would have quit thousands of miles ago.
So I have a question for Boomerang. Was there a question of being able to get your visa extended? Was your hike almost cut short because you hadn't planned to be here that long? Or
I haven't researched about the process before, so it was all kind of like, and I mean, you find something on the internet, but it was kind of like a pain in the neck. So I was filling in Snoqualmie in my formula and send it to them, then got my appointment and everything. So it was more, and they didn't respond to it. So if they don't respond, I can stay in the country. But it was always kind of like, okay, what happens when I get to the next airport to fly to Missoula? If I'm going to Missoula or am I going to Frankfurt? So that was kind of like it was quite a pain in the neck. But yeah, it worked out. So
so were you actually nervous like going to the airport because you thought they would tell you you had to leave the country?
oh yeah, for sure, for sure. Especially on the first flight when my originally visa was extended at that point. I was like, okay, fingers crossed, here we go.
Wow. I like that. That's pretty wild.
Surprise.
Yeah.
We're going to Frankfurt.
Yeah, man.
Kansas, how about you? What was your start date, your end date, and what was your sequence of footpath?
So I started at 7:32 a.m. on February 3rd, 2022. It was my 34th birthday. And then I finished on November 15th, 2022 at 10:28 a.m. at the Crazy Cook terminus of the CDT. So if we want to get really...
In addition to your feet looking like hands and your ICU experience and blowing out a joint, you are very precise. I mean, it's 0.8 miles. You got to get the 0.8 on there, and we're down to the minute of your start time and your finish time.
I think it's because he's a runner. It's a runner thing.
Yeah, I'm a little bit savant like that. Just being like, I don't know, like a high school and like college cross country and track athlete. I don't know. I pay attention to the minute details, which is just personal preference, I guess. But so in total, it was 285 days, 20 hours, 56 minutes. We want to get precise again.
Yeah.
But I started at southern terminus of the AT at Springer Mountain. I went 71 days north and got to Kinsman Notch, New Hampshire, I believe somewhere between 15 and 18 days ahead of Quadzilla. And it was and then I think Carl did Professor say he was like 2 weeks behind Quadzilla, so I was around a month ahead of him. But he also started in Key West, so we'll give him a break. So I got there. The snow was at that point was pretty impassable. That was April 14th, and I attempted Mount Wolf. So on my 72nd day, I tried to go up Mount Wolf and South Kinsman, and it was just super, super hairy and pretty dangerous at that point, even with spikes. So I actually backtracked down to the road, got a hitch to Plymouth, New Hampshire, rented a car in Plymouth, New Hampshire, got on a plane in Boston, and flew back to Kansas City that same day. So I was hiking on the AT at 1 p.m. and at midnight I was back home at my mom's apartment in Kansas City. I switched out gear. That was I guess the 15th I attempted a hike, went back. The 16th I was at my mom's apartment switching out gear for the desert. The 17th, that was Easter Sunday. I flew from Kansas City to San Diego, and I started at 3:58 p.m. at the border wall, southern terminus of the PCT. Went 56 days to Dunsmuir, California. Friend picked me up that lived in Cottonwood, California. Got a flight from Reading to San Francisco, red eye from San Francisco to Boston. Got an Uber from Boston up to Kinsman Notch. 17 days and change on the AT to finish June 29th. Transit day back on the 30th. Started back at Dunsmuir on July 1st. Went about a week, contracted COVID, had a quarantine in Ashland, Oregon with some friends, or in Medford, Oregon with some friends. And then as soon as the quarantine period was done, the 5 days, I was actually the best man in my best friend's wedding. It was a traditional Indian wedding in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So that was a full 7 days off trail from COVID and wedding. Got back at about 4:30 p.m., just somewhere between Ashland and Fish Lake, Oregon. And then then I finished the PCT at the border and then did the victory lap back to Hart's Pass. So I finished on August 12th, victory lap on the 13th. Got back to Mazama. My wife was flying to Spokane. I had some time to burn, so I tried to hitch as far east as possible. So I went from Mazama to Omak, Washington, which is on the Colville Native Reservation. The day of the Omak Stampede, which is like the biggest Native American festival in like the Pacific Northwest, and Washington's the biggest like state fair and rodeo in Washington state. So everybody was going in and nobody was going out. So that's as far as I could hitch. I was trying to at least hitch to Grand Coulee Dam, and then got picked up by my wife, went back to Spokane, and then took two off days, and then started at the Chief Mountain Terminus on August 16th. And just like Quadzilla said, just try to hammer south and try to be winter. And I arrived at the Chief Mountain Terminus on November 15th.
Wow, Jeff, you know what my takeaway from that is that he went through all the details, dates, times, duration, all kinds of information. He did not once look at a piece of paper or at a reference material. That all came out of his head. I don't know about you. I have trouble remembering what I had for dinner last night. So when you talk about savant, Kansas.
I have trouble with that. I have trouble with that too. Like I like my savant-like capacities are only for like useless details. So I'm reminded of that frequently, but I also completely understand that.
I just hear that and I'm thinking like, I can barely remember the date of things, and you're going down to the minute of like every single interaction. And I'm very impressed because, man, it is lucky if I even get the month right of things. But yeah, do you think, did you change gear a lot and plan ahead with this attention to detail like thing, or?
No, not really, actually. So I did switch gear. I had I guess really the only time I really switched gear, or I guess I switched gear twice, really going to the PCT and then getting ready for winter. So I got my winter gear again on the CDT in Lander, Wyoming is when I got my winter gear again. Or Rollins is when I got it.
We're going to fact check this, so don't worry if you're getting it wrong, but people will know.
Yeah. It was right around the time I saw it. I linked up with Professor for a couple of days.
Okay.
Yeah, that's when I switched out. Because actually the one day that was, I know that I hiked with Professor on the 17th, on September 17th, because I remember that was the second day in a row that it snowed.
Wow. Yeah. I don't know what I was doing that day.
A true trail savant right there. Thank you, Kansas. Yeah. Now, Professor, you had a little bit different approach. You had a different strategy to your trip this year. What was your start date, your end date, and how did you sequence things?
Yeah, so I had initially set out last year to hike 11,000 miles was my plan. I was going for the mileage record of the most miles ever backpacked in a calendar year. I changed up goals a couple times. The goal or the record that I knew of, the only thing I could find, was set by Swami Kamhonen. It was 10,244, but I wanted to do 11,000 miles because that would have meant that I would have averaged 30 miles a day for the year. And I turned 30 at the very end of last year. So it would have been 30 miles a day for my 30th year of life. So I thought that sounded pretty cool. Changed that up a couple times, ended up not making the mileage goal, but still doing the calendar year Triple Crown. So not a bad pivot. So I started on January 1st, 7:10 a.m. I remember the time. It was sunrise on the 1st of last year. And then I finished December 18th at 2:10 p.m. I remember that because it was like 2 weeks ago. And it was 351 days and 10 hours to the minute. So that was convenient. And so just a combination of like reading about calendar year Triple Crowns. And then also I was really interested in the Eastern Continental Trail, some stuff from Jupiter about seeing how he did that, and just dreaming up of like, all right, well, calendar year Triple Crown guys start a lot around like the 1st of March in on the AT. I think I could get there from Key West in 2 months. In about that much time, and then I'd have like a running start going into the calendar year Triple Crown. So that's what I did. So it's about 1,700 miles to go from Key West to Springer, going through the Keys and then the Florida Trail and Alabama Road Walk, the Pinhoti Trail. And then the traditional route goes up and finishes the Pinhoti and comes across on the Benton McKay Trail. But I just I took a road walk straight across, so that instead of getting on Springer Mountain, my route took me to Amicalola Falls. And I could like register my AT hike and stay at the shelter behind the visitor center there. So I got there on the 1st, and then I started the AT on March 2nd, which I found out in like September, October, talking with Boomerang. That was the same day that he started, but he was like a few hours ahead of me and then just took off, and I never saw him on AT. But I hiked with someone that hiked with him early on. So did that and was on the AT, and I was very consistently like, Quadzilla and I were about the same pace. I was like pretty much 2 weeks behind just about the whole time, which was super convenient for YouTube beta. I would just get on YouTube and then Quadzilla stuff would be right at the top. And so I'd see like, oh, this didn't look too bad 2 weeks ago. Should be great today. And it was. So I felt like I had a great weather window. Quadzilla said the snow wasn't as bad as he thought. So it was way not as bad as I thought. I didn't see a cloud in the sky, and it was 70 degrees my first 4 days in Georgia. In March. It was awesome. I saw like an inch or two of snow a handful of times before I got to New Hampshire. That was about it. And then the day, so like around the same spot that Kansas Express got off, I had a weird injury. I went from I can't remember the name of the hostel, but there's one right before you go going north up to Moosilauke. And then I went from there to the next road crossing. It's like 21 or 22 miles. And that ended up being my longest time day on trail just because of the ice and everything. So I left at like 6 a.m. and then got to the road and met a buddy at like 1 a.m. It took me like 19 hours to do like 21 miles or something like that. With like good chunks of like fairly fast miles on either ends of it. Anyway, so I got there, and I had like a weird injury thing. I had what I thought was like maybe a hernia when I was with my friend and went to go to a doctor. It was not. It was a fluid buildup, and they suggested I take time off. And that was the Friday morning of trail days. So I bought a ticket and went down and got to go to trail days, which was super fun. So I took like 5 days off and got to go have the AT party. And then finished up. I went on to Katahdin, and then just road walking. It was only another like 80 miles to get to the border so that I could go border to border on the first leg. And so I did that. And then the Northern AT just like really beat me up. And I had pretty serious, Achilles tendonitis that had started up when I'd gotten to like Damascus in like the middle of March. So for like 2 months, I was dealing with that. So I decided like it was maybe worth taking 10 days off to try to see if I could heal that up a little bit. Because the only thing I'd heard that was good for that was taking time off. So I think going from the like flat 30-mile days straight into the mountains is what kind of messed my body up there a little bit. So I took 10 days off, and then I had a permit to start the PCT on May 22nd. But I decided to start at Kennedy Meadows South. So on June 18th, which ended up lining up with my permit. You're not really supposed to do that, but it meant that I could have gotten there in that much time by the time I got like to where I was in the Sierras. So that was good enough when I was there. It's not the ideal thing to do, but it was good enough to get my permit to go through the Sierras, because that's the only place I've ever had it checked was there, and it was good enough to pass. So then I did that, like the northern 1900 miles of the PCT in like 60 days, and then swapped over and got on the CDT and started going south there. And then I felt like I was still in a position to get the mileage record, but I needed to finish up and get through as quick as I could. So I ended up road walking basically the whole state of Colorado to save time, so that I still connected my footsteps, but avoided the mountains and the snow and stuff that was coming in that the other guys were dealing with. I just took the easy route to get through there, and bopped through. And then by the time I did that, I really like messed up my feet pretty good by doing all the road walking and doing like 40 plus mile days on the road. So then I was trying to go back and finish up a section that had been closed by fires in Oregon. So I skipped 100 miles up there, from the Lion's Head fire closure. I was going to walk through it when I went through initially, but right when I got there, it was blowing up with comments about how there were all these people that were getting fined by like there were rangers that were there waiting to fine people for going through, because it was technically closed, and I didn't feel good about it. So it was a good thing to not go through there anyways. But I went back and tried to do it and ended up getting walled by snow. I had a friend that was on a tight schedule that was going to pick me up and drive me down to Kennedy Meadows. So I had to meet her at a certain time. And the snow was just too slow. So I ended up hiking in 50 miles of the 100, hiking back out 30 to a road. So I still had a little bit left there, but around that same time, I realized, like, I don't think I'm going to be able to do this mileage record thing. I think I'm going to settle for finishing up the Triple Crown. And so that was what I ended up doing, and then went down to Kennedy Meadows, hiked like 50 miles to Ridgecrest, and then took 10 days off because I was so beat up from going through and finishing up on the road and messing my feet up. So I took 10 days off in Ridgecrest, and then slowed my pace way down and just tried to enjoy the rest of the PCT going south to get to the monuments, and ended up catching the very last of the bubble of thru hikers. So I had some friends to finish with, which was really nice. So yeah, got there on December 18th, and then my mileage count was 8,451.7.
Okay. And I know that probably one of the highlights for you on the calendar Triple Crown was a bit of dinner in Acton, Agua Dulce.
Yeah, the high point. It all restaurant. Really culminated there.
That's right.
Man, who'd you go to dinner with? Anyone famous?
Yeah. This real snazzy podcast host came out, drove all the way up to take me out.
Man, those podcast hosts are just reeling in the big bucks.
Yeah, it's a bougie life.
Yeah, I put it on the expense account for the John freaking Muir pod.
Yeah.
Won't even make a dent. Won't even notice it on there.
Nice. Now, hey, before we get to our closing segments, let's go around and talk about, I don't know, a high point, a low point, an unexpected moment, anything you want to share from your trip that we haven't previously talked about. And I think we started with Quadzilla last time, so let's go back up to Boomerang.
Okay. Think about it. I would say my high point was when I actually start believing that I could do it. So that was like the moment where I was like, okay, maybe I can actually do it. I mean, if I keep up the pace, it will work out. So just keep the body healthy and move on. Which kind of brings me to the next low point, or the actual low point of it. It was 1 week before I finished in Rutland. My hip got messed up a bit, and I was in a hotel or something. I don't know where, but right before the White Mountains, I guess. And I slept, tried to make it to breakfast, and I was limping like crazy, and I had like pain in my hip. It was horrible, and I was like, what the hell is this? I mean, I made it that far, and yeah, and then I think vitamin I got it moving again, and yeah, what was the third?
It's okay. You didn't have to do all three. You could pick and choose from that. So that's good. That's great.
Let's keep it with a high and a low point. Yeah.
Okay. Kansas Express. How about you?
One of the high points would be probably making it to New Hampshire, but then pivoting to the desert and the PCT. So when I started at Easter Sunday on April 17th, it was just so cold, lonely, and dreary. I only ran into one northbound through hiker on the AT from Hampton, Tennessee to Kinsman Notch, New Hampshire. So it was just exceptionally isolating. But it's fine. I do okay in isolation, but it was just the weather was just pretty rainy and dreary. And after this Atlantic cyclone that came through, Winter Storm Mandy, and when I was in Shenandoah National Park, when it got down to -1 like ambient temperature, I was like, man, I'm like not even quite halfway through. This isn't super fun. But this thing isn't going to hike itself, so better keep going. But pivoting and meeting people from all over the world in the desert on much more mild grades, easy hiking. I can take an hour-long lunch break, hang out with people, like basically talk with everybody that I met. The weather's great. Afternoons are warm, nights are mild, and still, be able to get like 30, 35 pretty easily every day with very minimal wear and tear on your body was great. Another high point was seeing my wife at Kearsarge Pass. The day that I did Forester, I miscalculated food going out of Kennedy Meadow South. And so the first 18 miles that day was done on 270 calories. And I was just really, really in the red zone, like calorically. And my wife had actually drove to Independence, basically drove up to whatever that trailhead's name is, and then muled in over Kearsarge Pass, like 7.5 miles one way, a bunch of snacks, and then I hiked out with her. Well, we stayed in Lone Pine that night, and then she dropped me off the next day, ready to go all the way to Mammoth Lakes. So that would have been a really, really, really terrible additional 7.5 miles to get up and over Kearsarge Pass, and with a non-guaranteed ride down to Independence or Lone Pine. So that was like kind of like a ultimate savior moment. That was pretty amazing. And then seeing my mom, mother-in-law, and my wife at the Crazy Cook Monument when I finished was a pretty emotional time. So that was really awesome too. Low point. Getting the beta from other through hikes and probably overlooking or putting too much stock in far out comments. Seeing that like, oh, once you get to Sierra City, the snow's done. And I remember this like 2 days after Sierra City, I ran into just a wall of snow on these high angle traverses. And entering the Sierra or being in Kennedy Meadows on May 11th, and then just basically snow plowing and post holing for over 500 miles for 60+% of it. I know that for legend that's no big deal, but mere mortals like us, at least I and Quadzilla too. I find that pretty unfun. Just being in just waist deep snow and just taking the skin off your shins all day. And I had this one moment of like pretty extreme emotional weakness, and I was just like so hungry and tired. And it was like 2 days past Truckee, and I knew I wouldn't see my wife for about another 50 or 60 days. So I remember I just sat against a tree, ate trail mix, and cried. I just had a pity party for like 20 minutes. And then ultimately, I just told myself to quit being a bitch. And I just got back up and I resumed this high angle traverse. And I took a pretty long fall, actually, where I slid probably more than 40 feet. And it was pretty high consequence because it was just a talus field at the bottom. So I managed to self-arrest, got back on the trail, and then I just hiked very angrily, I remember, for about the next 30 hours. And those ended up being like pretty good mileage days. Anger can be a good motivator at times. So that was probably a low point. Also dealing with the cold and snow in northern New Mexico. too, like out of Chama, going south was pretty unfun as well.
Your stories are incredible because they start one way and then they just hit a drastic left turn, and it's great. I love them. You just never know where the story's going to go.
Yeah, a couple follow-up comments. Nothing like rage hiking to really increase your mileage. That's a good strategy. And Kansas, I don't have to tell you this because you already know, but if you've got a woman who's going to mule in 7.5 pounds of food to you, she's a keeper. So
yeah, she's awesome. A baller like that.
That's
yeah,
incredible.
Yeah, it was pretty nice. So fortunately, I didn't have to put her through too many technical things like that. But originally, she had sent a box to Independence for me to hitch off to, but where she had sent it to was permanently closed. And actually, there was an arson fire like 2 days before that had been started between that road that connects like Lone Pine to Independence and up to that road that dead ends at that trailhead at the base of Kearsarge. So when she found out that road was closed, that potentially she couldn't even get to the parking lot, that was a big like oh crap moment. So she was a travel nurse in Bakersfield, California, so she ended up just driving up and making it up. So she was definitely kind of the saving grace of kind of the beginning of the Sierra. And I definitely made sure to not miscalculate calories again, really for the rest of the year. My pack was pretty heavy at times because I just made sure to overeat than, save a few ounces or pounds and undereat.
Nice.
All right. Professor, how about you? High point or a low point or an unexpected moment?
Yeah, I'll start with like a low point kind of moment. I don't know what was the lowest, but I had a pretty low one in like the first month going through Florida. I was walking on the trail there, and the trail there is like a lot of roads and back roads sometimes. So I was on a back road, and it was after dark. And I was walking back, and it was MLK weekend, and there were a lot of hunters that were out after dark. So I'm just on these back roads just by myself, and like past couple guys walking by like with guns on their shoulders and just like, hey, how's it going? Just a hiker here. And like didn't say anything, and I kept walking. And then after another like mile or so, there were like a couple trucks pulled over, and there were a lot of folks with guns hanging out. And then again, same thing, like, hey, just a hiker. And again, they didn't say anything. It didn't feel awesome to be out there, just like wandering around in the dark by myself with these guys out for a hunt. I was covered in orange stuff, so I felt okay in that regard, but I don't know. So I kept going, and then looked at my my phone and at my map on Far Out, and I had missed where the trail turned back. They like cut off the trail, and I didn't really want to go walk back to see everybody. And so I just like tried to cut through the brush that was there, and it was really thick really quickly. And I kept like fighting through it for a while, and then eventually got to where it felt impossible to keep moving forward. And I checked my phone to go back, but it didn't show the road I had been on. So I was just a dot that was out there, and I could see where the trail was, but I couldn't see where anything else was. So I couldn't go back. So I had to like lay down and army crawl and push my pack through to get through this stuff. And after like 15 minutes of that, which is both not a long time and also forever to be in a position where like you can't like stand up or look around or anything, I finally got back to the trail and like, yeah, was cut up and felt fine, and like just made a resolution to keep an eye on the map on these back roads in Florida, especially after dark when the hunters are out. So got that knocked out of the way, and then I don't think there was too much, I mean, I don't know. It's weird how it doesn't feel like there was that much that was all that hard when you're that removed from it, but there definitely was. So anyway, so that's a low point. High point, I just like in general, I had such a great social experience on trail. Just with like seeing people on trail. I hit trails at like popular enough times that I got a little bit of hiker culture. Like March 2nd, I mean, there were like 70 people at shelters at night. The first few days I was on the AT, and then like at Harper's Ferry, there are all the flip-floppers that were out. And then on the PCT, I was with the bubble going north. So I was around people a lot, both on trail, and then meeting up with a lot of people off trail was just as good. So had a super social experience. But specifically, just like emotionally, the highlight was getting to Amicalola Falls and getting to be registered as an AT hiker again, having a tag on my pack. I'd made it through Florida and through the flats. I was excited to be in the mountains. I'd been in them a little bit already coming through the Pinhoti Trail, which was great. But it just felt good to be on that trail and just like the energy of being there again, where all of my hiking stuff had started. That was great. I was like tearing up going up the stairs. It just felt really good to be back there again.
Fantastic. Quadzilla, your turn. A high point, low point,
okay.
or a unexpected moment?
Yeah, I'll give you an unexpected moment was starting a relationship on the PCT. So Marvel was hiking. She was in the Sierras and at Chicken Spring Lake, and I was in the desert. And we'd been talking for a while, and then we made it official over the inReach while she was in the Sierras.
Best sentence ever. Wow.
Yeah, and then she did a bunch of 8 mile days or something like that and zeros, and then got off in Lone Pine and came and visited me while I was in Wrightwood. So, I was not expecting, that's what I told her. She was like, I didn't expect anything to happen with this because I was going off on a year-long hiking trip and you were going off to hike the PCT. So, yeah, unexpected, but good. That's why I'm out here in California now, and which I thought California was supposed to be sunny and nice. It's just been cold and rainy this whole time I've been out here.
It's a huge state. There's everything.
Yeah, other highlights would be probably with all the people. Hike with really good people through the desert on the PCT when it was super hot. And yeah, we did the aqueduct. It was 4 nights where we did over 40 each night and only at night. And then you tried to nap during the day. So by the end of that, we were all just super delirious and it felt really surreal. And we ended that, or in the middle of that was Hiker Town too. So which is a really weird place by itself. But then you get there and you're delirious without sleep and you're trying to hang out there during the day. Just a surreal, weird time. But that was really enjoyable. And then I hiked with Walkie Talkie through the southern Colorado. Actually, yeah, the highest high point on the trail for me was we came up San Juan Pass, which is 12,600 foot pass, and it had snowed. It snowed twice before, so there was probably 2 to 4 feet of fresh powder on the ground, and it took us. It was at least 4 hours of just slowly grinding up that pass, and we got to the top, and the wind was howling, and it was blowing snow everywhere, and it was probably wind chill in the negatives. Yeah, but that felt so good. That felt better than any of the other terminuses, just because of how hard it was and how because it was so built up in the mind of you got to get through Colorado before the snow hits. And now the snow has hit, and now we're at a pass at 12,600 feet, and and we did it. We're alive. We're up here, and then it's quickly turned into a low light because we had planned to be in camp over the pass, going down towards Creed by 6 p.m. and it's 11 o'clock, and we still haven't made it over the crest of that ridge to drop down into Creed. And so a lot of those traverses through there are just on the side of the mountain, and it's bad enough in the daytime, but now it's dark and it's still snowing, and you're just walking through snow on the side of the mountain trying to figure out where the trail, you just can't see. And so you have to stop and check the map every 100 feet. And I was really glad to have somebody there, because I could feel within the sense of panic rising, oh crap, if we get lost here, it's high consequences. But having that other person just assures you well, there's somebody else here. I'm not alone. We finally did go up and over, and that was nice. But that's what sticks with me is all the rough moments. The easier stuff the most boring parts of the trail were the CDT, where the weather was fine and nothing was going on, in Montana and Wyoming. That was yeah, that was kind of rough just mentally. Just it wasn't, you weren't close to the end yet, and it just wasn't much going on. So weirdly, it's the snowy and the ice and the people is what I will remember from this year.
Yeah, Jeff, I think each of them touched upon during this episode and during that segment in particular, the power of the positive power of all of the people that they were surrounded with out there on the trail. I mean, it's such a positive community, the thru hiking community.
Yeah, certainly. And I think the cool thing is, obviously, you guys have like the pinnacle of goals of people out there, but everyone out there has their own goal, whether they're the weekend backpacker or thru hiker too. And it's kind of cool that you guys are all doing the same trail and fighting through either snow or mosquitoes or even just perfect weather that happens to be boring. I think that's kind of a cool aspect. I'm curious, and just going around real quick, what the brand or model of your backpack and your tent, and we can just do like rapid fire around the circle just to throw it out there I bet people are always gear nerds and curious about it. So why don't we start with you, Quadzilla, and we'll just go around.
Yeah, I used the Hyperlight 55 liter Windrider. That's the name of it. I should know that. Tack.
Hyperlight, yeah.
Hyperlight, and same. Their Dyneema tent.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool. How about Boomerang?
I was carrying the ULA CDT, I guess that's the name, and the Top 10 Pro Trail in DCF.
Nice. And Kansas?
I carried the Hyperlight Junction 55 liter pack, and then I had a freestanding tent, the Mountain Hardware Nimbus one.
Okay, cool. Little different, but it seems to have worked perfectly for you too.
Yeah, it's a little bit like a coffin, but it's not too much of it's not too big of an area. It was insulated pretty well in cold weather. So
sweet. Yeah. Professor.
Yeah, so I had a ULA Ohm 2.0 for like 60 or 70% of the year, and then I had a Light AF 30 liter for a good chunk of the PCT and the CDT, and then I was sleeping in Z-Packs Altiplex.
Nice. You went from like classic to new age packs there. Just
a little bit of everything.
Yeah, cool. Sweet deal. So that's proof pretty much everything works out there.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, guys, this has been fantastic. We're just about done here. I hope our listeners enjoyed our time with the Calendar Year Quartet. I want to thank them for joining us this week. Guys, again, rapid fire, how can our listeners keep up with you on social media, and where can they find updates on your latest adventures? Let's start with Kansas.
Just Instagram or Facebook. Charlie.Jansen. You can probably search Kansas Express. It'll probably pop up there as well. My wife started a Facebook group called Where's Charlie Hiking Now? And it's just there are something like 500 people that follow me, mostly like close friends and family and whatever throughout the year, but just showed like GPS pins and whatnot. But I think that we're just going to keep it because my wife and I plan on doing a lot more traveling and venturing and backpacking. So we'll just probably hang on to that. So you can follow us there as well.
Nice.
And then your local news too, right? You're popping off on the radio interviews, TV interviews.
Yeah. So in the mountains in Colorado, it's the same owner for 4 different small newspapers. So like the Post Independent, the Summit Daily, the Vail Daily, and the Aspen Times. It's the same owner. So it's basically the same regurgitated article. But yeah, and just being a Kansas City native too, there was NPR Kansas City and just small local papers, but it's been fun.
Nice. And you're gonna be my pick when Doc hosts Thru Hiker Jeopardy. So you'll be in
Oh, is that a thing? Oh, please.
He's gonna make it one, I think.
Cool. Well, you just let me know. I'm
Phone
totally
friend
down.
right there. He's your lifeline. That's awesome. Professor, how about you? How can people keep track of you?
Yeah, I'm pretty much just on Instagram right now. It's at prof_Carl, PROFCARL.
Okay. Quadzilla?
Instagram is at Quadzilla Hikes, and then I put all my hike up on YouTube. So there's like 65. I still need to finish it, but it's almost done. So every section of the hike should be up on YouTube. You just search Calendar Year Triple Crown Quadzilla. It should pop up there.
All right. And Boomerang? Any social media?
I mean, I made an Instagram account to keep up with all the other guys and keep in touch, but it's at boomerang.hikes, and maybe I will post some upcoming adventures. So we'll see. I'm not sure about that yet. So.
Yeah, are you still a blue egg?
Excuse me?
Are you still a blue egg? There's no picture or anything on your Instagram in terms of your
Yes.
profile. It's just got it.
I mean, would you put that face somewhere? So it's kind of like.
And Jeff, how can people keep up with your antics?
I think just the Free Outside on Instagram or freeoutside.com will have everything else. Yeah, there's always a lot going. So just that stuff, you can find most of the stuff.
Okay. Well, remember to check out the pod on social media as well. We are on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And if you have comments or clips you want to share, you can send it to me at johnfreakinmuir@gmail.com. Guys, I want to congratulate you on your incredible accomplishment and thank you for coming on the podcast. I'm honored to be in the presence of so much hiking royalty, so many trail savants, as we said earlier, all at once. I want to wish you the best on your future endeavors. And before we finish up, any shout outs to people out there who were instrumental in helping you out this year? Let's start with Professor on this one.
Yeah, I mean, just like all my family, I feel like I encountered like just about everyone that's ever held any significance in my life this last year. Like so many people reached out. It was great. The Trail Angels were awesome. My friends in Florida, Natalie that became a big Trail Angel on the AT, my friend Phil. I don't know. I'd probably even should not list names. There's too many, but everybody that was involved in any way. Thank you so much.
Nice. Jack?
Hyperlight was awesome. This year they helped ship a bunch of like food boxes and just gear and everything else, and the other gear sponsors along the trip. Marvel, she shipped me so much food. Met me at weird places along the trail, and then yeah, man, the desert crew was awesome. Heaps. That was her third time hiking the PCT, and we still make fun of her for that. No other trail, just the PCT. Pyro and Big Toe, Retune is out there. I'm forgetting people, and then yeah, hiked with Walkie Talkie there towards the end, and trying to think. Oh, Catabatic, their quilts are awesome. They kept me so warm.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Renee, how about you?
Yeah, for sure, friends, family, everyone who supports me on the way. And actually during the hike, my trail crew from the PCT who I hiked with for 2 months, it would be Black Cap, Bully and Yoni from Belgium. Oh, Bully and Hitch. She actually got a trail name like just before the finish. So yeah, the big shout outs to them for sure.
All right. And Kansas Express.
My amazing wife, my mom, in-laws, the Jansen, Weimer, Peterson clan on my mom's side, the Gillespie and Czar family on my wife's side. Everybody was really instrumental in making this thing work as seamlessly as it could be. Yeah, close family, close friends met on the trail. I didn't hike with a lot of people throughout the year for extended periods of time, but big shout out to when I had a little bit of a low point in Northern California before Tahoe, or I guess the Sierra. Stretch, Crunchy, and Fast Lane. Those three were really awesome. And then meeting some of the other CYTC guys. I hiked with a guy named Tank Top who attempted a CYTC. It was really cool to hike with him for about 500 kind of leapfrog with him for about 500 miles on the CDT through Montana and Idaho. And just all the trail angels, hostel owners, just super kind people along the way. It takes a village. So it was really great. Definitely didn't get here on my own.
Yeah. And was that Chris Hurlbutt?
No,
this is okay.
Another stretch.
Got it. All right.
Yeah,
and
name's Shelling.
Jeff, thank you so much for co-hosting, and congratulations on your documentary on the Colorado Trail FKT. I can't wait to see it. It needs to get into the LA area soon, please.
Yeah, it's a pretty crowded market, but maybe, LA is tough.
Okay.
Thanks. And I'd like to thank the John freaking Muir pod because they've strong-armed me onto this thing, I think 4 times this year or last year. Was it
I think
3 or 4?
All told now, I think this is your 5th appearance. So you set the record. I talked to Ginger Balls last night, interviewed him for an episode, and he had tied the record with you. It was a short-lived tie because now you're at 5. He also asked me, Legend, to talk to you. He's found himself up in Alaska doing some dog mushing for the last year and a half. His life has taken a turn, and he is living his best life right now, up with 110 dogs and 5 handlers up there doing all kinds of just wild stuff. And they're looking for new people to take on that adventure. So he asked if I'd ask you. So I let him know I would.
This is dangerous. Well, yeah, I got to watch. I can't come on here too often or I'll end up in Alaska. Yeah. Thanks for coming on, you guys. You guys are incredibly impressive and your stories are pretty awesome. I'm just going to be blown away forever by Kansas Express's attention to detail here.
Thanks. Right. Well, thanks for being an inspiration to all of us. And congrats on your FKT on the John Muir Trail as well.
Thanks. Yeah.
That's nuts.
Kansas, are you not tired? You said you came off the trail refreshed. I just want to know, everybody else, are you guys as tired as I am?
Oh, no. Mentally refreshed. I mean, I was like, my feet were pretty pulverized, I think, like everybody else's. But I'm getting pretty antsy. I'm ready to start getting back into running. That's my main trade. So it's about time.
I'm so exhausted from 3 days pushing August and refreshed, ready to get roaring. Man, impressive.
But we'll see. We'll see. Exhausted. I mean, I haven't started running yet. So maybe that will be immediately regrettable here the next week or so.
I'm just exhausted listening to you guys. This has made me very tired. I need to take a nap. So hey, thank you for tuning in. Always remember, the trail is the trail. It doesn't care if you want to go downhill. It doesn't care if it's almost dark and you're looking for a campsite. It doesn't even care if you spent the entire day wading through snow and removing some shin skin during your calendar year Triple Crown hike. The trail is the trail. Embrace the sock.